You to think from, you see, in surveying what's been happening in the past, say, 20 years, because in that year, 47, you were on the coal board. Came the most disastrous period in fuel history. So the first quarter of 1947.
Before I joined the coal board,
yes,
not after.
well, you saw the situation on the coal side then. We were seeing it on the electricity side again. But later that year, of course, you had to see the other side as well. Now, 47 was the nadir of the fuel industry. There's no question. We've never had the like it since, although, of course, we've had a rather critical period. But I date 47 then as a sort of benchmark in our history, the nadir of the fuel industry. Thence onwards, there has been this gradual evolution to the power system of today with, happily, no plant shortages and fuel supplies adequate of all kinds. Now, I thought, therefore, so that if you'd like to take your mind back to 1947, set the scene for us, how you saw things then, in fuel, how the developing scene electrically, so to speak, began to unfold for you.
Yes. Well, of course, as you know, I went from the Trade Union Congress to the National Coal Board, and that was by decision of the Congress itself. I would not consent to making the decision myself. That had to be made by the Trade Union Congress as something which they thought was in conformity with their principles and the plans that they had put forward for nationalisation. Now, I had taken part, considerable part, in the preparation of those plans. And because of that, I felt that the movement of the coal board, although it would change my environment very, very much indeed, and some of it in a quite uncertain area, I didn't know what I was walking into. But I felt it was more or less a duty and obligation. And that's how I came on the coal board. Well, now, while I was on the coal board, you remember, I was made the chairman of the Miners' Welfare Commission. And I was presiding over a meeting of that commission when I got the message from the Prime Minister, would I go and see him? I went along, and he started questioning me about the personnel in the electricity supply industry. And I had to say to him, well, I've been out of touch with the people in the industry for some years. I know that what the industry's been doing. I gave evidence on it to the McGowan Committee when they were set up to deal with the matter of greater concentration of the industry. And I kept myself informed about it. But as to people, I'm not acquainted. So then he started to canvass certain names with me, different people. And he made it clear that his purpose was to determine who would be the chairman of the new nationalised industry. Then he suddenly switched off to me after he'd more or less dismissed the names that he had in his mind. Said, what about yourself? So I said, do you think I'm competent? He said, yes, of course I do. Well, I said, I think I could do it. And then I asked for an interval of time so that I could think the thing over and consult particularly Lord Hindley of the Coal Board. And that happened. Well, now that's my start. From that moment onwards, electricity absorbed all of my waking life. I thought of very little else. I concentrated on that. It was a vista to me, something opening up in which I could play an important part. That's my start in electricity. Well, as you know, our first job was to appoint an organising committee. Now, that was a government decision, just as it is in the case of the iron and steel bill now. And the members of the committee were left almost entirely to my discretion. Well, naturally, I consulted the people who knew something about it. At that time, Sir Johnson Wright was the chairman of the Central Electricity Board. They, of course, as you know, were our predecessors. I needn't discuss the matter of their functions and powers, except to say that the work of the Electricity Commissioners in 1919 and the work of the Central Electricity Board, particularly in building the grid system and linking up the stations, the selected stations and all that, was a really firm groundwork upon which we could build. Well, Johnson Wright naturally was the man I went to, and also the present Lord Hercombe. He was chairman of the Electricity Commissioners, and I sought his views about people in the industry, and I read all the documents I could get hold of, the reports of the IMEA, for instance, their annual conferences. I looked at those and acquainted myself on paper with what I thought were the more important people. Fortunately, I knew some, quite casually, I knew some. And that's how we came to form the Organisation Committee, of which I was chairman. Well, really speaking, the Act laid out the broad plan for the industry so clearly that the only things that we really had to do was to fit in, as it were, the parts that they were unable to set out in the legislation. And the first one, of course, was the devolution of the industry through the area board. See, the area board had been set out in the Act, but we had to determine whether that unit required any kind of supplementation. And we came to the conclusion that we must have a system of sub-areas, as well as the areas set out in the Act. And that was our main preoccupation. There was quite a lot of discussion about what should be done at the district level. We all knew that the district level would be the one most closely in contact with the consumers. And because of that, we said, how can we get the most flexible form of organisation at district level, and what should be the relationship between the district and the sub-area, and by the sub-area to the area board. That was our principal preoccupation.
Interesting. So this is going through now the summer of 1947, isn't it? Your organisation...
Summer and autumn.
Yes. Well, the bill became an act in August, wasn't it?
The following year, in August of 1947, yes. The bill started in 1946.
That's right, and it became an act in 47. Now, what were your feelings then? So at that particular period, you were switching from coal, almost like from the frying pan into fire. The situation, as I say, was the worst in our history, and has remained so, happily. What were your feelings of going into this industry with this, in this frightful mess? It was absolute chaos, and I mean, Paul Shinwell was a jibe, wasn't he, in those days? I've heard in theatres, wisecracks against him. The Crazy Gang, they had a little gag at the time, This is in the spring, you see, of 47. So you remember the Crazy Gang at
Victoria Palace? Yes.
They had a little gag then. They threw onto the stage a rat, a great black rat. Mr. Shinwell, as well. I mean, the Minister of Fuel and Power, he was called. His name was anathema to everybody, and fuel industries, they were an abomination in those days. How do you feel about this new environment you were getting into then? Were you happy at the thought?
Absolute confidence. I never had a tremor.
You didn't?
Without, I think, being egotistical, I had supreme confidence in the electricity supply industry, and I've never lost it.
People backed you up in...
Oh yes, yes, very much. In all the period we went through, when we had the recurrent troubles of the power cuts, for instance, the shortage of coal almost concurrent with that, in all that period, I had supreme faith. Never lost it in all our troubles. Well, it was a natural thing that I should. First of all, I was an electrician myself. Secondly, it was a resilient industry. It was the most modern of the industries. I I felt absolutely sure if I acted with common sense plus the knowledge that I could call upon, that was the important thing. I had the sense to know that trying to do that myself was just absurd. I must try to work through people, knowledgeable people, people who would be as absorbed in the industry as I was. That's the secret of it all. Never felt any trace of fear at all.
So your organisation committee then, so working over those months then, creating them, the structure, the organisational structure, you weren't really involved yet with decisions on policy of any kind. I mean, you were still going through a fuel crisis, but you and your organising committee were not yet committed to any policy decisions, were you?
Except in the sense you asked about me. Well, of course, the organisation committee had no sort of standing in policy.
Not yet, no.
Their job was to build up the organisation, and the thing for me to do was, first of all, to make sure I got the right personnel on that committee, which I did manage to do, and two, that we got the structure right. Now, on policy, I more or less made the decisions that were to be made myself.
Yes, I wonder that.
But I had again good sources of consultation. You see, the Ministry of Fuel and Power are very deeply dug into this thing, you know. You must remember that. That chap, Kelf Coyne, who was at that time in charge, I think, of coal and as well as, was it coal? Certainly gas, and I think electricity.
Yes, he was. Oh, yes.
He's a very knowledgeable man. Rather a pessimist, but a very knowledgeable man.
Well, his lordship anticipates a question of mine here, Morley. I was going to ask him, how did you get on with this man, Kelf Coyne, in those days? Now, Kelf Coyne, so a little while ago, recapped himself 20 years back, you see. This is an article in the Daily Telegraph. I ripped it out, you see, a few weeks back. The winter the lights went out, you see. Kelf Coyne.
I read that article.
Did you read it?
Yes.
Very interesting. It must have been a bit nostalgic for you.
It was. I thought the article on the whole was fair.
Yeah.
He has written articles that have been quite
very
antagonistic and hypercritical of the industry. And he has very little to back it up. Very
you were
little
in
to back it
contact
up.
with him. You were up against him
At that particular time, I got his cooperation. His cooperation.
I mean, he's been one of our most assiduous attackers, you know. Yes. And his book has gone in the book, what's it called, Nationalization of Myth, or whatever that went into another edition about 2 years back. It had been fairly well received, you know, as an objective book, not a piece of propaganda, if you like, a diatribe, because the man's book is so well documented. He's obviously writing from authority. And I can only feel he was a key man in those days.
Well, I don't know, frankly, I haven't read his book, but so far as the subsequent events were concerned, after the industry began to operate under nationalisation, after the organisation committee, after the vesting date, I had no doubt whatever that all of these arguments I could bowl over with considerable ease. None. One of his criticisms, of course, was on the capital structure of the industry. Well, that was something we inherited. He said, among other things, that we weren't putting enough money by for the provision of our plant from our own revenues, as distinct from borrowing. Now, those are questions of high policy. And I wasn't nervous about him on that. Because, first of all, the government itself determined how our money should be loaned. The bill itself provided for it. So I only had to fall back on the legislation in the case of argument. I wasn't nervous about that. No, not at all.
So summing up that year, then, so during your period as chairman of the organising committee, was it a year which was a precedent for you? It must have been. You had no similar experience, had you, in a crisis condition, coming in as a crisis state there, and having to recreate, if you like, something, which is virtually what you were doing, you and your organisation committee.
Well, I'm looking back on things. I'm looking back on things and trying to analyse my own state of mind. Let's see how I went about it. Now, I've got on here a number of booklets. These are all notebooks that I myself compiled and classified under particular headings. And I put down in those books what I considered essential information that I had to memorize very largely. I don't say I memorized everything, but I had to get a grip of essentials. And of course I had to decide what those essentials were. Well, I wouldn't like to say that I knew all the essentials. I knew most of them. I found most of them. Now, this wasn't something that I'd suddenly devised. It wasn't a method that I devised, you see. Now, its origin is a very humble one. I worked once at Cameleers as an electrician, and I was there a very short time, about 3 months. I wouldn't have remained there for anything, salary or anything else. Conditions of work were such. No individuality, none whatever. And we had a foreman. And that foreman once said to another man in my hearing, I have a little book in my office in which I keep a note of these things. Now, that set me thinking, and from that moment onwards, I began keeping a little book in which I kept a note of things. And while I couldn't lay my hands on them at this moment, I'm sure they're in my possession, I could show you how I reasoned out electrical problems in those books. How, if I were reading up electrical theory and I couldn't understand what was being said, how I would argue the question with myself. I could show you all that.
And you did this in book form, so you preferred to write it down.
Oh yes, right. I wrote it down, partly for refreshing my mind. So on. Well, I followed exactly the same system in the Trade Union Congress. Now, I didn't bring this here for you. I'm simply turning out drawers here, because we want to make room for some current stuff. Now, here's a case in point. Look at this.
Well, man says it doesn't destroy any of these things anyway. If you're turning them out, there's an archive.
Well, here's one on communism. I was never afraid to meet communist opposition because I knew their case better than they did. I had more actual data that I could fall back upon on the platform. You see, because of what got here, all classified, every bit of it. See, I'm not going to give you a series of articles on it, anything like that, or headings, but there they are. That book is full of it.
You have the facts for easy reference.
Easy reference.
Yes. Can I say some machinery is being developed now, very, very sophisticated machinery for the automatic retrieval, so to speak. Retrieval is the key word these days, of information from any source, miscellaneous source. You've got there a wealth of information. Nowadays, that would be processed as you go along to an online computer, if you like.
Cool.
And at any future time,
I never had a computer.
Could be retrieved and disseminated.
Well, I'm simply trying to illustrate it wasn't something new. Here is another one. This is a Trade Union Congress again, a section here. And I see the first part, evidence to be given by Sir Walter on questions 4 and 8. Now, this is dealing with a legal action. And I put down in this book all the matters that I thought counsel would ask me about. I could give you an illustration of that. When I appeared in a libel action when I was with the TUC, where I was very badly libelled with 5 other people by the then daily worker. Well, I had consultations with counsel. We had very good counsel. William Jard, for instance, who became the Lord Chancellor, and also with the then best man at the bar on libel, a man called Valentine Holmes, Sir Valentine Holmes. He was head and shoulders above anybody else. Now, on the other side, there's a man called D.N. Fritz, who I always suspected of being a fellow traveller, and I've never changed that view, a fellow traveller of the communists. But he was a very good lawyer, and he was a very good cross-examiner. And therefore, I wanted to be prepared. Now, my solicitors, they said, well, now we'll have all the documents for you. all the documents, you see, and we will hand those documents up to you as you require them. I said, that won't do me. And they said, but why? I said, I want prior notice. I want to be ahead of council all the time. So what I did was this. I got a loose leaf binder, such as we instituted here at the electricity, when the British Electricity Authority was formed, for the members, a loose leaf binder of all the documents they required, properly numbered, and I had the same. So when council was searching for his documents, I was reading down my own, getting the gist of it once again in my memory, and something more. Now this is one of the things that surprised me. I learned quite a lot.
You recommend dossier, isn't it?
Council.
The key word here says dossier. You've always
Yes.
had a dossier, or a compendium of all the background
Always,
information you're going to
always.
require.
For instance, I've got one on the House of Lords.
Facts at your fingertips. That's the message. It's the facts at your fingertips.
Yes,
That's the message.
yes.
But not just, was it Mr. Gradgrind in Dickens said all he was concerned with was facts. You remember
Oh
that?
yes, in Dickens. Dickens, that's
All
right.
that nationalised, my boy, to the
Oh, I remember that, but I wasn't Mr. Gradgrind.
Not Mr. Gradgrind.
I wanted all the facts.
Documentation is a very, very important part of one of those.
Well, now what happened in that case might interest you. On the Sunday, first of all, I'd been told by my counsel, and remember the best man at the bar, Valentine Holmes, I'd been told by my counsel, confirmed by my solicitor, but not necessarily by William Jarrett, I'm not sure he was brought in at that stage, that a certain range of matter that concerned the libel would never be admitted in court. The judge would rule them all out. I said, I'm not so sure. And the result was that on the Sunday before the trial opened, I think it opened on the Tuesday, the Sunday before it opened, I spent the whole time, I was in bed, but I spent the whole of the time on that Sunday writing up my answers in shorthand to the questions I was likely to be asked. And I put them down in shorthand. It was as simple as ABC. On the one side of the book, well, on one side of the book, you see, there was the matter on which I'd have to rely, and the probable question. On the other side of the matter was my answer in shorthand. Now, counsel made a capital mistake, not my counsel, but the other side. He never asked me, what is that document from which you're reading? He never asked me that. If he had, he'd have seen the shorthand notes on the other side of it.
Inadmissible, was it?
Pardon?
That was inadmissible in court, then, was it?
Well, no. As a matter of fact, our counsel were wrong, and the judge admitted all the matter upon which the other side had libelled me. They admitted all the matter, and my judgment was right, because I suspected it would be a semi-political trial, you see, because, the communists opposed the war and all that, don't you? You remember that. They first of all agreed to and supported the government in the war, and then did the volte-face, the somersault, and were against it, you see, and then this libelling system followed that, you see. So I thought to myself, there'll be much more liberty given here, and I told our counsel that, but they didn't agree with me. Anyway, I was prepared for it just the same. So I was a jump ahead all the time of counsel when he was questioning me, cross-examining counsel.
And this is a dictum you
adopted that system and adopted that system here. I can't just drop my eyes on it now, but I could show you in these books I've got in front of me. I haven't got them all here, some are at home, you see, but I could show you in these books, in the earliest of them, I could show you such things as all the essential dates. The date, well, here we are. I've got it as good luck happens, and it happens to be in the book of 1957, because I carried this matter forward, dropping the obsolete matter as I went on. But here, I kept this. Bill introduced on the 20th of December 1946, published on the 10th of January 1947, second reading on the 4th of February 1947. Committee E, Bill 25, in committee for 24 days. See, Committee E concluded 22nd of May. Report stage, recommittal, and so on. That was the legislative side. I went right through that. so that if anybody asked me any questions at any time about it, I had a clear sequence. Now, establishment of the organization. This is on the other side of this same leaf. Organization committee commenced 13th of May 1947. First meeting of organization committee 21st of May 1947. Last meeting 11th of September. Central authority names published 21st of August. Central authority first meeting 11th of September 1947. Area chairman announced 26th of November. Now, I think here shows the kind of reasoning I applied to this. Area board chairman announced 26th of November. First conference of central authority and area board chairman on 26th of November, the same day. Now, how was it done? I was given...
Very small, with a little compress there, so this is history, condensed.
Well, how was it done? It was done this way. First of all, the minister consulted me about the names of the area board chairman, you see. Do you think Mr. So-and-so is the right man for it? And by that time I was well versed in personnel, you see, because of course the structure of the act was one thing, the personnel was a much later thing. So I knew who were the people I thought ought to be on it. And some people who thought they should have been on it weren't on it, and other people who were on it weren't the first selection, put it that way.
Did Astley guide you at all in those days, sir?
Not one scrap.
In the world of electricity supply through Limehouse or Shoreditch? Limehouse,
Limehouse,
yes. Many years.
Yes, Limehouse, I believe.
He should have been able to help a little one, would have thought.
Attlee was very well informed. Attlee took a very keen interest in electricity supply, was a member of the electricity committee, whatever it was, for the municipality or his constituency. And I have from time to time read things from him in other connections which showed that he was well informed. But I never discussed on any occasion any electrical matter with Attlee until long after I became chairman.
Gateskill would have been your main correspondent there, so would he?
No, Shinwell.
Shinwell. But Gateskill was coming up then. Do you remember?
Much later.
I was very impressed with that youngster he was then. Do you remember when he first emerged? He certainly emerged as the parliamentary secretary, wasn't he?
Well, I had an advantage there, you see. I had an advantage there because I knew Gateskill. Yes.
Through other associations?
Oh, positively. I appointed Gateskill to work on behalf of the TUC in Austria during the course of the Dollfuss. They couldn't call it a revolution exactly, but it was a fighting in Austria between the socialists and the then Dollfuss government. And I appointed him there to deal with the question of relief. You see, so I knew him. I regarded Gateskill as one of the coming men. One of the coming men. Anyway, to continue with this, what I'm trying to say is, you see that I get these essentials down. Area Board Deputy Chairman announced 9th of December. London Board was appointed on the 19th. The first meeting of the London Board was the 19th of December, the same day. Randall followed my method. You see? He got from me the names of his people he was going on his board and called in advance of their appointment, nominated them in the event of your becoming, etc., guarding himself like that. Common sense. Well, nucleus boards announced. You must remember this. When we started to function, there were on some cases, only 3 members of an area board. The Act prescribed a minimum and maximum, and they came within the minimum, because the maximum people had not at that stage been appointed. They weren't not selected. It was a good system because the minister wanted to have the advantage of consultation with the chairman of the board before appointing his members, and with myself, you see. I knew more about it than the chairman of the board did, but I got advanced information about all sorts of potential people. Anyway,
you started each board with a nucleus. Was this common to every board? They were all working on a small nucleus.
I couldn't be sure, but I don't think any board was fully constituted. I don't think so. At this date, I couldn't remember. Well, anyway, the nucleus boards were announced. And then we had the first conference, and this I regard, quite frankly, this as the item which gave me more strength than any other to go through these troublous times you're speaking of.
Yes, indeed.
Not that I was worried about the troublous times,
Well,
but I had so many
to hear.
people who were competent to advise me on them. Now, this is what I call my strength. Quite without any authority, without any governmental suggestions, anything like that, I called a meeting, a conference of the Central Authority, all the area board chairmen and their deputies. We hadn't at that stage appointed the divisional controllers. That came later. Now, why do I call it strength? Because there I was able to expound the policy which I believe we would pursue. I told them, of course, on every occasion, well, what I'm saying is in advance of Central Authority decisions.
Almost an element of autocracy here, sir, with all due respect, wasn't it?
Well,
Forced on you.
interpretation of what was likely to be done, put it that way. Take, for a single instance. You remember Penwell? You remember Penwell of the Electrical Contractors Association?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Now, Penwell came to me before the vesting date, well before the vesting date, in a state of considerable trepidation. And he said, you know, you people have the chance of wiping us off the map. So I said to him, why should you assume that anybody desires to wipe you off the map? So he said, well, a lot of the municipal bodies had opened their electrical departments and there was intense competition, and now that they had the chance, they would use their resources and that sort of thing to cut out the contractors. Well, I said, I don't know what the policy will be, but I'll tell you one thing. There will be no change in the policy. There will be no extension of the policy until you and your association have the opportunity of coming and talking it over with the Central Authority. There will be no change. Now, when the Central Authority was formed, there were 4 area board chairmen, as you recall, on it. And without going into names, some of those area board chairmen were rather restless that I'd made this promise. And I said this to them, gentlemen, I am the chairman of this authority. I was the chairman designate before the act was passed. I was the single person, the only person in office at the time that this question was put to me. And it's a matter of good faith. And whatever you gentlemen do, there will be no breach of that promise. Now, why did I do that? Because I wanted to show them right at the beginning I was not the type of man who could be coerced by numbers. I'd had too much experience of that in the trade union movement. And I knew it was fatal ever to do that. I'll digress for a second, and this will never be recorded, I hope. It will be not here. But I'll digress. We had one of our top officials who came to me on one day, long after we were established. Long after. This was a man of high repute, and one I regarded most, and still regard, most highly for his ability and his spirit of desire to see the organization as efficient as it could be made. Right. This man came to see me one afternoon. I think it was in Trafalgar Buildings. And I could see he was very disturbed. So he told me that somebody in the authority, a superior of his, had given him the lickings of a dog, as he called it. And I couldn't understand this because I knew the man concerned didn't feel he could do it. That the man, the superior, couldn't do that. It's quite contrary to my conception to treat anybody like that. And he told me a story, and I said, "Oh well, all right, I'll fix it up." I could see it was a storm in a teacup, and so I said, "Oh, it'll be all right." Well, I called the superior in. Immediately, the chap had gone. And I said, so-and-so has been in to see me. And this man, who I highly respected, I respected them both very much. And this man who I highly respected, the superior, he jumped up at once and he said, "Oh, well, if that's if he's coming along to you behind my back," he said, "I might as well throw my hand in." I said, "Well, now, let's get 2 things straight. If you talk about throwing your hand in, we'll accept it. Let's get that straight for a start. I said, the second thing is that I am the chairman of this organization, and this office is going to be open to anybody who wants to see me about anything concerning this organization. That's where we start. You will know all about it. Nobody will ever be prescribed from telling you what happens. Well, that was that. Then I got a repercussion of this. Oh, there was no more trouble. I didn't finish my story. I said there's just some evidence of the way in which this first man who came to see me, the official, how upset he was. I said, do you know that man broke down and cried in my presence? I said, men don't cry unless they've been very, very deeply wounded. And you wounded that man. And the man I was talking to, the tears welled up in his eyes, and he said, all right, I'll fix it. And we never had a word repercussion of that. And those men worked together for years afterwards. They were both good men. I got the right man. But if I'd have been coerced, I don't know.
You do agree there has to be an element of autocracy, really. At the pivotal point, you can't have
I wouldn't call myself an autocrat.
Committee for there's got to be somebody finally, and it was you in this year of destiny when you put it that
one
way.
One man who can see the whole thing
Well,
in one picture.
Well, I tried to do it.
You did the year of destiny.
Well, you see, I think if you can look at it for a moment from my point of view, I did not pride myself upon knowing more about any particular branch of the organization of its work than anybody else. What I did pride myself on was knowing more about the generality of the organization than anybody else, because I'd taken the trouble to acquaint myself. You see, that's what I mean. Now I did that. Secondly, my strength came from, such as it was, it came from the readiness to consult other people. I wasn't an autocrat in that sense. Once the consultation had taken place, I knew exactly what I intended to do.
But somebody has got to take, in a year of destiny like that, somebody has got to take the ultimate responsibility. One man, ultimately.
The man on the bridge.
Well, to be quite frank, I never felt the weight of the responsibility.
But looking back,
I never did.
Would you have felt that you might well have been shivering, at the ghastly prospects of yourself to this industry?
First of all, I had great faith. I had great faith in the people I worked with. Two, I had a confidence in the government of the day, whose politics I shared. I never introduced them here, as you know. Excluded them completely. I don't know to this day the politics of any member of the central authority. I got into a little trouble over that once, with old Briggs, in a libel action. But anyway, that's beside the point. No, I cannot honestly say I ever felt it. People sometimes said to me, well, how do you manage to carry this responsibility? I said, my shoulders are broad. I said, I've got two deputy chairmen for a start. I said, I've got a central authority. I've got conferences of all kinds. And I can talk to those people and consult them.
And you've been used to very big organizations, so that must have helped you.
Well, I think really, you're making me think of things in going over in this, things that I haven't really meditated at all. In the year, it's been rather natural to do things and not perhaps reason them out quite so closely. But I think where I was different from most people who would have been in this post was that readiness to talk to other people and find out. See, secondly, recognizing my own limitations. I couldn't pose as the chairman of the organization and know everything, and I never tried, but I knew a damned lot. See? Well, anyway, that's how it presented itself to me at that time. I had such confidence, not so much in myself. I never had any introspection or anything like that. But in the sense that I was in a virile organization, I was in something that I could build, and moreover, I had two grand builders. Now, I never told anybody this, but I went out of my way to get Henry Self. And why did I go out of my way? Because I met Henry Self in Washington in 1940 when he was head of the British Purchasing Mission. And I was so struck with him, I said, I wrote in my diary at the time, I could almost show it you. a most unusual civil servant, a man who could make his mind up, see, and didn't have to be saying, well, we must consult so and so and so. When I telegraphed Henry from San Diego and said, can I go back to England in a Catalina flying boat? See, he telegraphed me back, yes, certainly, clear the way. See, no argument, something like that, see. Well, now that was a man to look for. So I went to Arthur Street, who was on the Cold War, and who I very greatly admired. I said to Arthur Street, I want to get Henry's help. But although Henry doesn't know this, I thought of Henry at that stage as the secretary of the board. See, with being a civil servant, if I'd have thought it out, I'd have had some doubts about Henry's decisiveness in this new world he was coming into. You follow? It was different. Well, civil service is one thing, electricity supply industry is another thing, you see. But if I'd have thought it out, I might have had that as a question mark, but I didn't. Arthur Street said to me, if you can get Henry's help, you'll be landed. See? And so I made sure that I was landed. I went to Henry, talked it over, and I saw he was a shade reluctant, possibly on a salary reason. He never told me. Might have been that exchange wouldn't mean much in the way of increased status or salary, you see, as secretary. So I said, well, all right, I said, my conception of the organization is that we want a chairman, one for operation, a deputy chairman, one for operations, and one for administration. Because the government's idea through Shinwell was, and indeed people had been approached, was two operational chairmen. One who would deal with generation and the other with distribution. I knew very well that the problems were far more likely to arise in the correct organization. If we got that wrong, the other faults would follow. We'd be appointing the wrong people. So I without difficulty, without any difficulty whatever, Shinwell gave me authority. Yes, you have your chairman in charge of administration, deputy chairman in charge of this administration, and your other chairman in charge of operations, which was my own conception. No opposition.
Had there been this...
now, Henry never knew that I don't think Henry knows today that he'd ever been thought of by me as secretary. I don't think so.
Had there been this dual deputy chairmanship on the operational side, one for generation and one for distribution, was there any attempt to envisage the deputy chairman distribution side in those days? I mean, Sir John Hacking suggested himself, didn't he? Virtually.
Do you mean as I see what you mean. Now, he was the obvious man.
Yes, was there a counterpart?
Certainly. We had Hacking on... Oh, no, we didn't have a Hacking on the organisation committee. We had Johnson Wright. Again. No, but I agree with you. Hacking earmarked himself.
He stood out, didn't he? Without any question.
Yes.
He was a pivotal man on the generation side.
Yes.
There couldn't have been anybody so obviously destined for distribution chairmanship.
I would subscribe to that entirely. Yes.
More nebulous.
And he was a good chairman. He was a good chairman.
Oh, yeah.
I might say that on the same line that I told you a few minutes ago, I had exactly the same kind of reaction in the case of, well, it affects yourself. Again, it's the sort of thing we wouldn't say in public. But, you know, I was anxious to get somebody at my elbow who knew, broadly, the operational problems. You see, I had a glimmering of them, but nothing much more, and there was a hell of a lot of detail. I didn't want to sit in a committee like a fool and just subscribing to other people's views. I wanted to have some views of my own on operations. And so I spoke to Hacking about that. Now, Hacking's reaction was a curious one. He said, I can give you all the information you want. I said, now look, you yourself don't know the sort of thing that I want to find out. You don't know them. You're too high up. You see? I said, I want a man who can find out from me at the right levels and go to people and find this sort of thing. Oh, he said, I think that's all wrong. He said, it's a case of you're appointing a man and letting him get on with the job, meaning appointing himself, you see. So I said, oh, not me. No. No, that's not me at all. I'm not going down the line from Mr. So-and-so. If I want information, I am not going to you, and you going to your chief engineer, from your chief engineer to your transmission engineer, and your transmission engineer to your construction engineer, all that. No fear. I want answers quickly, you see. And I said, no, that would be the system. I said, I shall go to anybody I wish in this organization, irrespective of anybody. But the senior concerned will know all about it, because the person I approach will be told to inform his senior exactly what it's been all about, unless I tell him the contrary. And I never told anybody the contrary. Never.
You believe in that principle, so you've always believed in the principle of going to the man.
Well, look what happens. Now look what happens. Of course, I'm very well aware of the ease with which feathers can be ruffled. I'm very well aware that in the Navy, in the Army, and places like that, you must go through to the corporal, to the sergeant, to the captain, the colonel, or the major, and so on up the line. To my mind, that's stultifying. To my mind, it destroys interest. I'm always a person, all my life, all of my, say, post-trade union life, and during that period. I'm not saying this was true of me as a workman, but I always wanted things quickly. You know that. Mr. Tooth knows that. Because half the pleasure to me is in getting things quickly. If I write to a firm and they don't reply in 2 or 3 days, I say to myself, well, that's no damn good. If they reply per return of post, that's the firm for me.
But it's whilst the inspiration is fresh, isn't it?
Well, always. I've felt that. Well, now, that's how you came into the piece. Because I don't think you know this, but when I went round the ERA and you acquainted me so thoroughly upon the work you were doing, I said, that man knows. And that's the man will find out when he got into a region when he perhaps doesn't cover. He'll find it all out. And you were the man I had in my mind. You see, but Hacking didn't know that.
The inquisitive mind, yes. The inquisitive mind.
Yes, well, he has. He's so damned inquisitive, sometimes he looks at a full stop of something I've done and he says, can't pass that, sir. But I don't think he'd ever been inaccurate on his facts.
I can believe that.
I don't think he has. There was one occasion when he challenged me when I knew I was right and he was wrong, but that was not a question of so much of fact. That was where I retained in my memory this question of the coal shortage of 1965. Do you remember? Well, we had estimated we needed 70 million tons of coal, and the coal board could only promise us 53 million, and 17 million of energy had to be got from somewhere else. And hence, we went in for the, as you know, the big orders for oil, which would roughly cover about 9 million tons, not of oil, but of energy, heat energy, and also the new atomic program, which was just coming in at that moment, you know, and so forth. Now, you said, no, I was wrong about those figures from the coal board, you see. And the point of fact, I showed you from one of these books that I was right. That's the only time I can remember. That's a pretty good record, isn't it?
Well, if I can quite believe it, he's still got the same faculty now.
He's reliable.
In the first 5 years or so, after the organization was underway, what was the principal memories that come to mind, as it were, of the first 5 or 6 years' work?
Well, of course, outstanding was our breakdown of May 1923. 23rd of May, Sunday, 23rd of May, 1948. Where half the system was cut off, the south of England was cut off. That was I'll never forget that. It was a natural sequence of events, was shown later on, but it was the thought that the new organization had somehow not met its responsibility. That was the primary thing in my mind. Now what's gone wrong? And I couldn't find out. But what I did, and in retrospect was a very wise thing, I got considerable praise from this from the government, Herbert Morrison and a few other people for what I did. But to me it seemed a natural thing, and still seems a natural thing. What I did was this. Through Luffingham was our publicity man in those days, got Luffingham to call a press conference for the following morning, Monday. And don't forget these happenings about the breakdowns were taking place up to 9 o'clock at night.
Yes, right.
You see, so that there was no time lost. And the following morning, at 10 o'clock, the press was summoned for a conference. I took the precaution at that conference because I myself didn't know what had happened. I didn't get to know really, and only in a very general way, until the Monday morning. I had everybody who had any connection with the thing, except one person who should be nameless. You wouldn't know him anyhow. But I had the chief engineer, the chief transmission engineer, the area board chairman, although he is two area board chairmen. They didn't come much in the piece, but there might have been. There might have been. And I had all these people present, as well as the two deputy chairmen and myself. Now, to my mind, that seemed a very normal, simple, straightforward thing to do, and I would do it tomorrow. Same kind of thing. In any kind of emergency, I'd have the people who knew.
Yes.
Now, the first point I made to the people was that there had been no change whatever in the system of operation. And I turned to now, wait a moment. Isn't it amazing how names slip your mind? He was then the chief, Mr. Oh, fine tackle, Mr.
Schofield?
No, wait a minute. He was a chief. He was in charge of transmission.
Lane.
No, higher up than Lane. Oh, fancy me finger, Mr. Peaty. Mr. Peaty.
Peaty, of course.
Yes. I turned to Mr. Peaty and I said to Mr. Peaty, Mr. Peaty, has any change whatever in instructions or methods of operation to deal with the system been made since the vesting days? And he said no. And he's a Scotsman, and he carried such conviction.
Oh, yeah.
No question about that. He carried conviction. That was the first point that I wanted to make. And this isn't the new organisation that's done this.
No.
See? And then I went step by step into what had happened, and got the story told by the people who were responsible for it, you see.
This was at the press conference.
Pardon?
Was this at the press conference?
Yes, I'd had a quarter of an hour rehearsal before. only to prime them with the sort of thick way I was going to handle it, you see. Not actually the detailed questions. And they had a good case. You see, I said to the press people right in the early stages, now you must remember this. I said, we've got predecessors in this field, and unfortunately, they had, in 1936, they had a similar sort of occurrence. Smaller system, but the occurrence was in proportion as grave as this one. I said, nothing happened between that time and this, but we had that experience to draw upon. And the main thing we found from that experience was that it's a very risky thing to make press statements almost immediately after an accident of any size on the system, because we don't always know the circumstances ourselves. A line is broken down in mid-country. A lineman got to go out, or a party of them in the blackout. Maybe snow, maybe something of the kind, to find out. We can't know immediately in certain seconds. I said, I'm taking a very big risk in telling you this, because I myself am only finding out as I'm talking to you. See? So we got the story unfolded that way, and it carried such conviction to them that we never had a bleat. We never had a bleat.
Well, it's undermining the philosophy of the grid, you know. It's very fundamental, this thing was.
Which was?
You might even say the future of the grid was in doubt then, wasn't
It was. Oh, they actually, some of the newspapers came out the first in the morning before they got the story, you see. I suppose they'd prepare it, it'd be somewhere about midnight when they would do their stories. How was it? How had it ever occurred? Here were towns in the south of England affected by our statement. The first statement we went out was breakdown on the King's Lynn line, you see. That was all known, where the breakdown had occurred, but we didn't know the details. And they got their story out. How was it? Here the thing place in Lancashire, mind, and yet Hastings is cut off. There's something wrong with this method. That's what they thought. Yeah. But he didn't say that after our conference. No, in other words,
that was an assessment of public opinion. You were anticipating public opinion.
Yes.
Do you believe that today, as a similar circumstance, you believe in, as soon as possible, telling the tale?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. First of all, I think it's a thing, the good faith comes in here. I don't think I was a genius at all in anything I ever did. I had certain elementary principles, and one of the principles was good faith. Instead of slating the manufacturers, I made friends with the manufacturers because I knew we depended on them. Apart altogether from personal ties, well, they could have wrecked our program, and we could never have traced the reasons. We never traced reasons. Another person didn't follow that method, as you know, and there's been some considerable repercussions of that since. But mine was good faith. That was my first doctrine, you see. Now with the press, the same. I had, as you know, a monthly conference which I never missed. As far as I can now recall, I never missed one conference during my chairmanship with the technical press. And that brought in about, 8 people. And I talked to those chaps just as if I was talking to the central authority. You see, never once did a line or a word get into any of those papers which was of a confidential nature. But they knew the problem, and they trusted me. Now, they wouldn't have trusted me if I'd have led them up the garden and told them a lot of, who we were. In any case, they were intelligent and experienced enough to know they could detect the difference. And that's how I treated it, you see. I don't consider that was remarkable. The only thing was, in all these things, I took certain little risks. For instance, I had to tell people things before the central authority knew them. And constitutionally, I took risks. But they seem to be fulfilling, and they seem to be so justifiable, you see, that I never was nervous about it. Never. Oh, no.
You were obviously a pioneer in the field of public relations.
Well, now, maybe, that may be true. It was very simple system.
Good communication.
Oh, I've always been...
A proponent and a practitioner. You would feel that is a dictum here, so wouldn't you?
Now, do you know, Tuck can vouch for this, because he's been present and seen it. I visited more power stations, I should say, than any man in the authority. Yeah, right. Now, what did I do at those power stations? I not only looked round the plant and so forth, I was always well informed. I mean, he always used to send me background information about the station. If by any chance there'd been a published brochure, I always had a copy of it. I had photographs of the principal people concerned. If the power station superintendent that appeared in the electrical review, I had that and a bit of his biography. I had the generation engineer or the construction engineer in the division, whoever it was, the divisional controller. I had their photographs, and I would take them down, and half an hour before we got out of the car, I'd be looking down this and memorizing it again, you see, probably for the third or fourth time, and so forth, and then I'd be able to go up and say, "How are you, Mr. Allen?"
That's right.
He knows me.
What a shot in the arm it was for those fellows. Did you
It
realise that?
was. Well, partially.
Partially it was.
But I always knew. Well,
I remember, so when I went round for you once, when you were sick in Liverpool.
Yes, that's right.
Remember that?
Yes.
You had to visit about 4 more stations. Well, I thought Lady Citrine insisted that you would not go round to those other visits. Remember, I really happy indeed to go round for you. And Trustee Briggs, I think it was, put a car at my disposal, you see. So I went round these 4 stations, and I chatted with the LACs. Not that I'm going to say Lord Citrine chatted with them, but, you know, trying to give them a message from his lordship. You just exchange notes with them.
You succeeded very well.
I could sense how much those chaps, you know, were thrilled at your going there, you know.
Well, they were.
The
Now,
message
I tell you,
had to bring back, you know.
There was a twofold reason why I went. The first was my natural desire to meet the chaps. That's that. And the second was something that Johnson Wright told me. Now, this seems incredible. Incredible. You know, what is Archie Duncan? Andrew Duncan. He was the chairman, as you know, the first chairman, and stuck it right until the time of Page. Now, he would, for some reason, probably administrative, he too would go down to a power station, but he would never get out of the car. He would call the officials in and talk to them. Sit and remain in the car. Now, Johnson Wright told me that, and I thought to myself, my God, with all his reasoning capacity and experience, he was a capable fellow. was Andrew Duncan. With all that, he lacked the first element, namely not meeting the chaps. He should have gone and shaken those chaps. It wouldn't matter a damn. If he didn't know a boiler from a turbine, it wouldn't have mattered.
Human relations.
See, as long as he talked to them.
But all the kind of wealth of Citriniana, Morley, you know, that would interest you, power station visits. You know that, don't you?
What?
There's quite a bit of Citriniana, if I can use that term, about power station visits. So many recall
like
you're
them.
going down. And if I may say so, your pertinacity, your determination, you know, to see and find out for yourself, exposing yourself to risk at times, you know, putting yourself in ludicrous positions almost at times, to see what's going on.
Yes, but the great thing is to see at first sight, to meet people at first sight.
That's it.
Getting close.
That's it. Now look, people would hardly believe this, but I would go up to, we say, a stoker. I'd see two or three chaps in this case. I'd go up to a stoker. I'll bet that I felt more self-consciousness in meeting that stoker than he felt in meeting me. But I learned to conquer it. After the first few visits, I more or less had not exactly a routine, but something of the kind. I'd say to him, well, now, what's your name, you see? So-and-so. And how long have you been here? So-and-so. Have you always been on this job? Well, he'd tell me about that and so forth. And I'd say, what were you doing before you came here? And he'd say, oh, we'd been in the Navy, or he'd been on the locomotives, or something like that, you see, or he may not have been in the industry at all. Then I would start. Now, when you came here, if he was a strange chap and didn't know much about the industry, I would say to him, now, when you came here, tell me just exactly what happened to you. Were you shown round the station? Did somebody take you round? Yes, who was it? You see, and it might be the charge engineer or somebody like that. Mr. So-and-so, he would say. Yeah. All right. Now then, were you told anything about the station, what it did, what it was for, and what was going on here? Oh, yes. Well, how did you learn that? Oh, well, there was about half a dozen of us, and we just sat down in one of the committee rooms, and Mr. So-and-so came along and told us about it. That was good for me, you see. I knew the... how can I put it, the induction course was going on, you see, informally perhaps. Well, I would just leave him and oh, by the way, as we got on, I would say, have you been to any of our courses at Horsley Towers or at Buxton, you see? And very often I came across men who had. Now I'd say, tell me frankly, I want to find out, this is not to criticize anybody at all or get anybody into trouble, but did you understand the speakers? Because we had, I'm sorry to say, I suppose it's natural, we had a good many inarticulate people trying to lecture.
Yeah.
It couldn't be helped.
No.
You see, first of all, I'm sure you would all agree with this. There's no need to really argue it out. But I think people will always listen with greater respect and attention to a man who's doing the job than a man who's telling them about the job. That's right. If you get a man, say a charge engineer, say, or a divisional controller, or anybody, station superintendent, anybody telling people like that, they instinctively have a regard, that man knows his job. And they're satisfied, because when I was an electrician, I don't suppose this has disappeared, but when I was an electrician, unless our foreman was capable of solving our little problems when we got in a knot, we thought, damn all of him. He might have been the best organizer in the world, but we didn't matter about that. He didn't know. He didn't know, and we hadn't much respect for him. And I'll bet that still goes on among the skilled people anyway. I'll bet it does. Well, anyway, I wanted to, as it were, let them recognize that I knew the difficulties there were in the way of explaining things, because we had first-class engineers, and many times I told the chaps this. Now I said, you'll have to study, you chaps, as well as your engineering skill, you'll have to study our administrative problems. If you don't do that, you'll never get anywhere. You'll never get anywhere. You won't get in merely on your engineering skill.
And communication.
See? Yes, you must learn the art of plain speaking to people and getting them to understand things. I used to say that.
communication.
Well, we got over it, as you know.
Yeah.
But there were always some people who were a good deal better than other people. We called on them quite a lot, you see, of course. Well, that's how I'd start. And then if I was talking to the superintendent, mainly because of what Tukey had taught me, you see, I would say, I suppose you're working at 900, are you? Because it'd be about boilers, you see. Are you working at 900? Yes, the fellow would look at me and so forth and say, now, tell me, what sort of ice content have you got here? See? And I would go on, all founded on what Tukey and bit by bit, I began to know these things.
Yes, but you agreed sufficiently to start the conversation.
Oh, very much so.
Very good.
Very much
communication
so.
and at all levels.
I always had, wherever I went, a pre-knowledge of the station, its surroundings, its circumstances and that, and the personnel, as well as it could be got. Of course, we couldn't go down to charge end grade or anything like that. I might know the names of the man, but I wouldn't have a photograph. But more often than not, we had those.
We're coming to the end of the tape thing.
Yes.
That's very good, I think. So very grateful.
You know, can I say so on this question of your being brief? I think I'm among many who have been really impressed by what you have assimilated on this technical side. You know.
Oh well, I love it.
I have one or two very, striking examples. One very much in my mind now. Talking about the firm, I remember when I was with you on this occasion.